Welcome back everyone for a very special episode on Some Room to Grow. This is going to be a little something different for the channel, but still related to our lovely backyard garden space we have here. Something that is definitely not lovely, however, is this old deck. That's right, we are just a few days away from finally being able to tear down this rotten, crusty old death trap, and I am very excited, looking forward to that. There is not going to be any demolition of this in this video, but I know how much you all love to see that, and I do too. So I am planning to get some of that in a future video, but for now, before we go tearing this thing down, I would just like to share everything that is wrong with it, because let me tell you, there is a lot wrong with this. So let's not waste any more time. We'll get into it. Now, before we go into all of the structural problems with this thing, we should address the very obvious, glaring cosmetic issue with all of the paint peeling off of here. As satisfying as that is to do that, it is not good for the deck itself or for anything else around here, as that stuff peels off and spreads. So when we first moved into this house 8 years ago, this had a fresh coat of paint on it. It was much brighter than this, a bit too bright for our liking, but it still looked nice. But it started peeling already, probably maybe a year after we moved in. And at first I started to look around at some options, maybe putting another coat on it, even though I didn't know exactly what this product might have been, or if this was even something that was meant for decks. I admit that is kind of fun. But other than that, maybe just sanding it off, staining it, doing something. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it, and didn't know if I wanted to put the time and the money into it, so I let it go. And of course, I really looked into the deck a lot more and started finding a lot of things that weren't quite right about this. And then, of course, just with job changes and trying to save up money for a new deck, especially since we wanted to go with a composite that costs a bit more, it wound up taking all this time to get to this point, and this has just continued to peel in the meantime, and it just makes an absolute mess everywhere and looks awful. And I've tried just scraping at it and going with a vacuum to clean up whatever is coming loose, but that is just an endless task and impossible to keep up with all that. So I really can't wait to get this out of here, and with the composite, we are never going to have to worry about anything like this again. All right, so now on to the fun stuff. A bit of backstory. The house was built in 1970, and I really don't know if any part of this structure was part of that original construction with the house, but if I had to guess, I would say probably not, because there is so much about this that looks like a DIY project, and there is a lot that they did not get right. The most immediate potential hazard to us has become the stairs, and this is what finally decided us that we had to get this deck replaced, because we had been trying to save up some money for it for years, and that happened toward the end of the summer last year. This whole staircase had been tweaking and twisting for years, and the landing finally started to separate there in August last year. So that was when we said, okay, that's it. It's time. We have to do this whole thing, and we saved up our money over the winter. So we'll come back to the stairs in a second here, but there's something else I want to show you first that's going to tie into that. I want to show you the footings on these posts, and I use the word footings just to refer to the part of the deck I'm talking about. But I don't know. I don't think that quite counts as a footing. So for some perspective here, for the new deck that we're building, in order for it to be meeting code requirements, we need to have a full solid concrete pillar that is 12 inches in diameter by 42 inches down to get below the frost line for our area, to prevent the footings and the whole deck from heaving when the ground freezes over the winter. So this is maybe 8 or 9 inches or so. The post goes down about that far, and there's some gravel on the bottom and just a little bit of a sprinkling of concrete around this. And you can see how it is split from the corners here. It was split all the way around. I did not have to break this up. It was already cracked like this. In fact, I didn't even really need a tool to pull it out. I just wiggled it by hand and pulled it out. So that is quite dangerous, not secure at all, and that is why the whole deck really has been shifting around during the winter with the ground freezing and thawing again. And I suspect that is exactly what was happening with this post on the stairs, and why this has completely tweaked over the years and started separating from the rest of the deck. Now, my theory is that either these stairs or even this whole deck was built not too long before we bought the house, because when we moved in, this was all straight. Everything was actually lined up. It looked pretty good and solid. It did look like a DIY project. There were definitely some suspicious things that I noticed right away that looked concerning. We'll get to that in a second. But otherwise, it looked solid, and it was deceptive, because even I think after that first winter, this already started tweaking a little bit, and it's just gotten worse and worse over the years as the ground has continued to heave these posts around, because they are not anywhere near secure enough in the ground. So, boy, if that's all true, if I'm right about that, then that means that this whole deck, if this was all built at the same time, it hasn't even lasted a decade before becoming an injury waiting to happen. So here is what I just mentioned before, that I just showed you briefly, how you can tell that this cut was just eyeballed, apparently. That goes down this whole side of the deck. In fact, they didn't measure this cut at all, and I really don't know how this came to be. I don't know if the deck was all built at the same time, or maybe they retrofitted the stairs on this side at some point and decided to cut that down a little shorter to give access to go down to the garage. However it happened, they didn't measure where they were going to cut. So that means the width of the deck where it's attached to the house is a full foot. That is 12 inches wider than the far end of the deck. So there was no measuring whatsoever to maintain a perfect length there and perfect square shape of the deck. I really don't know what else to say about that other than great job. Boy, this is so much fun, isn't it? Okay, now on to the beam to post connections. This is definitely not how you do it. So the only way this is connected is that there are pretty heavy bolts that are all the way through the beams and through the post to connect to there, and all these posts are that same type of connection. But that means these, well, if you can't really see, the posts don't go all the way up to the boards, so that means all of the weight from the deck and from people standing up above is all being put on the bolts themselves, which is very bad. If those bolts were to rust out, if you have a whole bunch of people up on the deck, those bolts could easily snap. What you need to have is the beams, either a single beam, it depends on how big the deck is. On our new one, we are going to have 2 beams together for a 2-ply beam that is going to rest directly on top of the post, and you can connect that with a post cap that allows you to make all the connections from the post to the beams, or you can notch out a section of the post and then the beams will rest in that notch and you will bolt through this direction. Either one of those allows the weight to distribute from the beams right down through the posts, and that is a much safer, much more secure way to deal with that. And this is very bad, and I can even show you on this one. Of course, there are some markings. I don't know if people had dogs here before, but this has also split, and it is right where that bolt goes. The split goes way down there. So, oh boy, I just really cannot wait to get all of this stuff replaced. And there's me right over there. And now we are under the deck to show you that there is something very important that is missing from here. And again, I don't know how building codes have changed over the years, but I do know that right now you have to have what's called a ledger board along here. That is generally a 2x8 or 2x10, depending on how big the beams, or the joists that you're using. And it is a board that is attached flat against the band joist of the house and goes the whole width of the deck. And it is very securely attached to the house. And then all of the joists with their joist hangers are attached to the ledger board. So this obviously does not have that. I can imagine that is not nearly as secure as having the ledger board in there, especially for a deck as large as this one, which is over 14.5 feet wide by 16 feet out. That's a pretty big deck. Too big for us. That's why we are going with something a little bit smaller for the new one, also to save on the cost of the composite. But there you go. It's missing a very important component of a deck. And lastly, as kind of a bonus, I'll just show you this. It's not really a big part of the new deck, but I mean, this is a slab that you can see has shifted over time, and it is angled toward the house, which you definitely do not want. You want things to be sloped away for the water to drain off, like that one over there. So this whole slab needs to be broken up. I started working on it with just a small sledgehammer and a concrete chisel, and obviously it's going to take way too long. So once we get the whole deck pulled down, I'm going to go at this with a sledgehammer. And I believe this is really the only evidence of what might have been the original structure of the deck, because there's another one of these over here, and that may have been where they had stairs that were coming down. These may have been old footings that do actually probably go down quite a ways in the soil. Unfortunately, I can't use these things at all because they are not quite in the right place for where our new stairs are going to go, and they also weren't the right size and everything, and I have no idea how far down they go, so there's just no way to trust that those are going to meet the requirements for the new deck and the inspection and everything. So there you go. I have to tear these out before we can even get to putting the new footings in. So anyway, I hope that was a fun time to see all that, and I hope you learned some things in there. I am not a professional builder. I'm just somebody who loves building things. I love studying how things are put together, the physics of the construction. And as I started learning so much more about our building codes and everything, and about proper building practices, I could just see that there were so many serious problems with this one, and I am just very glad that we are able to take this out now and put in something that is going to last a very long time, and it will be so much easier to care for. With the composite, we won't be having to stain it or paint it or anything. It will just need some pressure washing to keep it clean. It will last a long time. It's a bit of an investment, but well worth it. So thanks for watching, everybody. If you like this content, you want to see some more of, what happens with this deck, subscribe, and I'll see you again real soon.